All right. Well, welcome everybody to our next installment for Ghost School. Today's class is going to be on paranormal journaling. Now, I'll kind of go through a little bit on how I came up with this class. But before I do that, I'm going to play a video for you guys. So do watch this video. All right. So for those of you that aren't aware, I've been in the field for close to 30 years, and I actually had written the book, My Haunted Journal. And I wrote this book because I felt that journaling was so important when it came to the field of paranormal research. And so when I finished this book and I started, reaching out to publishers, I had a hard time getting this book published because of the fact that, a lot of the publishing companies already had their how-to ghost hunt book. And I tried to explain to them the importance of this book and what made this book more unique, and the fact that it actually is a simple guide. A lot of ghost hunting books out there tend to be biased. They tend to mostly focus on the psychic realm of ghost hunting, or they tend to be more focused on the high tech end. And for some people, that can be very confusing, or a little beyond their grasp. So I thought, why not just put together a book that was very simplified in helping anybody with any basic knowledge in ghost hunting, but also too with the importance of journaling. Because journaling is so important, sorry. You'll actually see why through this presentation. And the nice thing about this book is it actually becomes your own personal journal as well. So thanks to Erie Press and David Weatherly, they saw the importance of this book and have now published the book. So a quick introduction. What do you do when you can't prove it, but you suspect that there's something there? Well, the first step is to journal, okay? Whether you believe you need to call in clergy, paranormal investigators, a psychologist, or deal with the issues on your own, the journal will be the most helpful tool to all involved. Now, when introducing the journal into your life, remember the elephant in the room is best dealt with by one step at a time. So patience and consistency are extremely important in forming journal habits. So we're going to go back to that video that you guys just watched. And I always have to ask, and we can go ahead and unmute people. So people can talk if you can. Does anybody recall what time the event took place?
I didn't see the timestamp.
That's fine. That's fine. All right. So the time it actually took place, go back to here, was actually 14/21/12. All right. Now, do we feel that the time is important?
Could be.
Yeah, well, time is very important. When you're experiencing something paranormal, you do want to keep record of the time. All right, this is going to help us to determine if there's patterns to the activity, especially if things happen always at a certain time. So always try to keep record of times when things happen. Now, how many people were on the scene? Anybody know?
Well, eventually, including the person that was allegedly possessed, eventually there was 4, but at first you just have 2, the one random shopper with the bad bleach job and the victim or the attackee, and then the 2 additional people come in.
Okay. Now, there were actually 5.
Oh.
You were close, but it was still good, still good. All right, so there were 5 people involved. There was the person watching, and then they had the 3 people around the actual victim herself. So that she would be the 5th. All right. So why would you want to know who was there? Well, why is that important? Anybody?
Well, if we're just looking at this example, you know, when I first started watching it, I'm thinking, okay, is the person standing there, is this a setup? Do they really know each other?
Uh-huh.
And then knowing if you're bringing in random people who had no idea what was going on, to me, that brings more validity to it. So I'd want to know who was there, like who knew this woman, who didn't, to try and parse out kind of the validity of the claim.
You're right. You want those witnesses, because witness accounts are going to help to determine, you know, credibility, or even to help debunk the situation as well. So witnesses are extremely important when doing the investigation. Now, why did the woman react the way she did?
Well, I always get pretty excited over a good linen sale myself, but I'm not sure that was it.
From what I saw, like the sheets fell over, the package fell out, and when she touched it and put it back is when she started getting all possessy.
Right. So asking questions is what starts the process of the investigation. All right, it starts getting us thinking about what's going on here. So this is just the first steps, is you want to ask, well, why? Why did this happen? So the issue that we have, though, is, you know, the answers become very diverse in this field. So we don't have the direct answer as to really why this happened. We don't know exactly, you know, what happened here. We were just observers, you know, watching this through the video. Now, was there any other form of documentation happening during this incident?
The random girl with the bleach blonde hair in the basket, she started filming it with her phone.
Great. That's awesome.
As
So
any good
yes,
bystander does when someone appears to be having some kind of medical issue.
yes, and that's becoming a standard. So it's great that there are people out there documenting what's happening here. So we do have other forms of documentation besides just the cameras, because unfortunately the store cameras were very limited. They weren't up close, a very blurry image, as you could see. So hopefully the cell phone image might have captured a little more detail. So how did the encounter end?
Well, after she was like did like another scream, and then like all this force, like air, like kind of pushed out and like blew and moved some stuff, and then she was normal again.
Mhm. Now, did you notice that there was a gentleman who was helping hold her down, was doing some sort of prayer in front of her? So we feel that maybe there might have been some sort of exorcism kind of going on. But the interesting thing too is also the sheets fell down again. So do you feel that this was real or fake? What's your guys' opinion?
Fake.
Anybody else?
I thought it was real because she kind of looked like she was just shopping and she was all by herself. But I think it could have been real, in my
Okay.
opinion.
To me, it seemed real, but I mean, it could have been a very elaborate hoax, but it did seem pretty. Because the girl standing next to her seemed truly startled, like very wary and unsure, approaching her.
Mhm.
And then when she started screaming, and then I don't know, it seemed real, but it might not be. I mean, that's something you'd have to research and look into.
I just think it's a little too good to be true if there is a priest that just happens to be there, whatever kind of priest, or somebody that can actually throw the demon out of the person. It's a little too good to be true for my taste.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh. Well, the fact of the matter is we don't know. You know, that's the biggest problem we have in this field, is it is so easy to produce documentation like this. It could easily be staged. Unless we were there to witness it for ourselves, again, you can't always assume that everything is real. Okay.
But can I ask a question about just the validity, like how much of like human psychology and whatnot goes in? Because I did notice the guy acted scared and fell down, but then he's laying down in a completely vulnerable position. As humans and animals, you don't lay there with your stomach exposed
Right.
to a crazy person. So are you kind of looking for some of those psychological tips, you know, kind of the tells, you know, to use a poker term, I guess?
Of course, yes. Whenever you're reviewing any of this, you know, these videos and stuff like that, you do want to apply all of that. But the problem is too, is there are some very well staged events like that where they apply the psychology to it as well. So again, you can't always assume that everything is legit whenever you see it, because again, it is so easy now to fake a lot of this stuff. So for me, this is where you apply the investigation skills that that you may have known or you may be learning today in helping to determine if these experiences are legit. All right, so moving on here. I'm going to show you guys some videos here, and I want you guys to watch this. Okay. So we get into bad memory. All right. The human memory recalls. Let me shrink up the screen here. Sorry, you guys got all your videos here or images here. All right. So human memory and recall works nothing like a computer. All right. So a short-term memory only retains information for up to 3 minutes. So that's one of the reasons why I played that video first, then discussed a few things, and then we went back to that video because I wanted to see how much you guys would remember after about 3 minutes.
Excuse me.
Now, when it comes to short-term memory, it's very brief. In fact, when it comes to short-term memories, they're not actually rehearsed or actively maintained. And they easily can be forgotten very quickly. In fact, when it comes to short-term memory, it is very limited. And it's commonly suggested that short-term memory can, on average, hold approximately 4 pieces of information. So when we go back to those pictures that I just played for you guys, did anybody notice the actual words that were showing up on the side?
Yeah.
Okay. How many can you recall?
The tiger hat.
Spade, ice cream,
Yep.
Book and orange. I've got 4. That's all I could remember.
Okay.
tiger, house.
I just
Yeah.
remember book, orange, and ice cream. It took me till like halfway through the pictures to realize that there was writing on the side.
Okay.
Me too.
Well, this also shows how observant you guys are.
Piano
I put,
was one.
yeah, okay. So in all average, most of you had 3 to 4. Some of you had 4, some of you had less. And again, that's just how our short-term memory works, okay? So again, I also chose photos that would be distracting because I didn't want you guys to see the words. But being that you did see the words just shows that you're a little more observant on the than the average person, okay? So I'm going to shrink your screens back down again here, you guys, and we'll continue on. So how can short-term memories become long-term memories? Well, again, it's something that has to be rehearsed. In fact, does anybody remember the time when before cell phones, when you actually had to remember somebody's phone number?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember how usually when people gave you a phone number, you had no way to write it down. What did you do? You
Just
kept.
repeat it to yourself.
Exactly. And that actually is a simple way of making a short-term memory a long-term memory, is repeating it to yourself. Okay. So do you remember what you had for dinner 2 weeks ago? Anybody? It's a hard thing to remember. Uh-oh, what happened here? There we go. Okay. So most people don't. We have a hard time remembering what we did even, 6 hours ago. So how many believe that our memories decay?
I believe that.
Okay.
Do you mean the memory itself?
Yeah, the memories themselves. Well, researchers believe that that's not true, that a memory has limited capabilities. In fact, it's interesting that, when you consider hypnosis or even triggers, we are able to recall memories that we had forgotten about. Certain smells can trigger certain memories. Certain events in our lives can trigger certain memories. So they are there. It's just harder to recall them. All right. So without rehearsal, memories become harder to access. It's not the memory it's lost, it's a limited ability to retrieve it. So when people's memories are tested, the more work that they have done to construct or reconstruct the target memory, the stronger the memory eventually becomes. Okay, so it's just like I said, trying to remember somebody's phone number. If you keep repeating it, you will actually have a better time at remembering certain events. So this takes us into telling your story. All right. Now, does anybody remember the telephone game? A lot of times we played this as kids where you
Yes.
get a big group of people, you'd all get in one line, and one person at the end would actually tell a short story. And that next person would tell that short story to the next person. And that person would tell that short story to the next person. And so by the time it reaches the end of the line, it's not the actual story that was originally told. All right. So while it's a game that's amusing, it also teaches us the important lessons that people often forget. All right. Also, word of mouth is not always accurate. There is a good chance that at least part of the story is inaccurate. Now, stories become distorted through time, space, and circumstances, sometimes so much that the intent of the original encounter is completely lost. It's not our intent to lie, deceive, or embellish our encounter. We just learn to tell the story better over time. So basically what we're doing here is we're convincing ourselves that we're not crazy, that we did indeed experience something here. We also start to identify when you start to lose your audience, when you start to tell these stories or these encounters. We start to convincing others of your encounter. Because again, you don't want them to think that you're crazy. And then practice makes perfect in storytelling. So how observant are you? Okay. Can you have an hour-long conversation with someone, but if you close your eyes, you won't remember the color of their shirt? Now, that's very common, especially today. We didn't forget, we're just not paying attention. And the biggest problem is we no longer observe, and that is constantly because of technology. You know, and we experience this all the time. When a group of us gets together and we're sitting at the table, most of us are sitting there looking at our phones, trying to, you know, have a conversation with the other person sitting across from us as well. And this is what we've come to in society today. We are constantly distracted because we're so focused on our cell phones. So we're not paying attention to the things going on around us. In fact, I'm going to show you guys a video, all right? And I want you to watch this video.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball. The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla?
Yeah.
For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game?
And then,
Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold. When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events. And that's the monkey business illusion.
All right. So hopefully you noticed a few of those things, but you probably didn't catch it all. Because again, that was a lot going on at once. But again, it just helps you to understand how observant you are. So let's get on here. All right. So here's another video I'm going to play for you guys. And I want you to see if you can see one major event happening in this scene. Okay. All right. So what do you think the major event that took place in the scene?
Guy stole a wallet.
Very good. Yeah. So there was actually a pickpocket happening in that scene. Now, you might not have noticed it, and that's fine, because this unfortunately is what we call a chaos environment, and I'll get into that in just a little sec here. So in the scene, you'll see this guy in the black. He actually took his wallet from his bag. All right. Now, this again is, how much do you recall? And again, you can't expect to know everything that's going on, because your attention is probably in various parts on the screen. But again, the challenge was that I put together this video because it was a chaos environment. And this is why it's so, there's I'm getting a little higher. There's too much to observe here. And this is why it's so important to produce controlled environments when doing your research and investigations, right? Because you never want to put yourself in a chaos environment. Now, there are two types of thinking. Now, there is fast thinking, and this basically allows us to react and process information right away. It reacts automatically, of course, keeping things running quickly and smoothly. And of course, the other one is slow thinking. This is where you actually have to process information, and actions can cause us to overthink things or induces stress. It overrides our intuition or instinct. Now, this prevents us from exhausting ourselves. Now, both affects our perceptions and reactions throughout our lives. Okay. So when we get into priming, that's where I need a volunteer. I want somebody to say the word and not the color. So who wants to volunteer for this one?
I'll do it.
All right.
So you want me to say all the words?
Yep. Say the words, not the color.
Yellow, orange, blue, black, green, red, yellow, purple, red, orange, green, yellow.
Now you kind of struggled there a little bit in the beginning, because it was actually kind of hard, wasn't it, in the beginning?
I was, because my mind is like, okay, so but the words are colors. They're just not the colors of the words.
Exactly.
So then for a moment there, my brain was trying to like, okay, he wants. And I was like, is there some kind of hidden meaning? So I was overcomplicating it.
And you were, and basically, it seems pretty simple. For a lot of people, this can be a struggle, because your brain wants to say the color, not the word. All right. So another thing, go ahead and finish these two. Anybody?
Eat soup, wash soap.
Okay. All right. So, but you had to think about that for a little bit. So moving on to the next one. The first word or image primes our thoughts. All right. So this affects a person's memory in both positive and negative ways. So this is why subliminal and suggestive information can apply. So filling in the blanks. University study shows us that if we've got the first and last part, our brain will fill in the rest. So June, is your mic on?
Hold on.
Are you dying?
Yes.
Okay. Well, at least it's on video. We can all watch this and observe, okay? That's part of their next test. They have to observe you dying.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to put up a paragraph, and I want you to read it out loud.
Okay. According to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and the last letter be at the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole.
As a whore?
A whole.
All right. So again, this is how our mind processes information. And again, this also goes into that quick thinking. We want to get through the problem as quickly as possible. So this makes it easy for us to do that. Now, altering memory. Basically, what I want to get into is the illusion of truth. Okay, so if repetition manipulates your memory, so basically, belief comes from how often you hear it. It becomes familiar to us. If others believe it, it must be true. So research shows sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. So if given the correct information, it won't change what we think. Sometimes it offers us even more likely to hold on to false information. And so this is what helps politics as well. You know, if they constantly give you false information, you will believe it eventually. So it affects our self-image. We don't like to be proven wrong. Making debunking a challenge as well. So how many think that this is something that other people do? And of course, you are unbiased, unbiased observer, and clearly see other people's stupidity.
All the time.
When I'm driving.
There you go. And to be honest, we're all guilty of this, and this is bias blind spot. All right, it's our crippling ability to observe our own bias. Okay. Now, believe it or not, now how many people believe that this photo is real paranormal evidence?
No.
No, that's fine. Now, the thing is somebody does believe that it is. Okay. And basically this is just a situation where somebody's hair got in front of the camera. And that's what hair will look like when it's captured with the flash in front of it. Now, of course, the problem is, you know, no one's perfect here. And sometimes it's best to agree to disagree when it comes to the paranormal. Research has found that it's hard to persuade a believer than a skeptic due to the value the believer has invested in their beliefs. In fact, it requires less evidence for the believer when it would for a skeptic. And this is one of the biggest challenges that we have in the field of paranormal research, because a lot of people will submit evidence that they want to believe is true paranormal phenomena. And even if you can debunk it and prove that it is fake, or not, I don't even want to say fake, that it is not paranormal, because I don't believe that they're trying to produce false stuff, but they just believe that they captured something, that you're going to find yourself in this constant fight with them, because they want you to accept that what they're submitting is true paranormal evidence. And again, this is where you just kind of have to walk away from the situation, because they've put too much value into what they're presenting. All right. So once you have latched onto that belief, you might be less likely to let it go. And so you yourself have to be aware of this. And sometimes you have to let go. So, and this is a prime example, Houdini versus Doyle. Now, back in the 1920s, Houdini meets Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and both quite opposites had become fast friends and enjoyed these debates over mediums and their practices. Now, unfortunately, what happened was, well, sorry, getting a little ahead here. Their friendship didn't last long, because Houdini started to debunk Doyle's most trusted, mediums as fakes. And of course, Doyle did not like this. How could someone whom was so gifted in developing characters like Sherlock Holmes, whose ability was to solve any case with the powers of deduction, fall victim to such simple trickery by well-known fake mediums? And why is that? And the answer is actually pretty simple. The answer is the fact that he just wanted to believe. He wanted to believe that these mediums were legit. And so, again, he fell victim to that. Now we get into investigating the investigator. Okay. Now, influencing others becomes a two-way street. And I experience this quite a bit in the paranormal field. All right. Now, understanding the investigator is very important. You have to understand their personal experiences, their training, and personal beliefs as well. Then understanding the client. What is their personal experiences? What is their personal beliefs? And how much do they understand what's going on? Because this is where we influence each other in this field. And this is what we call projection biased. And that's basically a phrase that basically means that someone has influenced others' idea about their experiences. That's why it's so important when you're interviewing clients that you don't want to give them leading information or leading questions. You want them to describe their experiences the best that they can without you telling them any information like, oh, how, what was it, the color red? Was it the color blue? Did it have a male voice? That's all leading information. You want to ask them, to give you those details. All right. In fact, I'm going to go back here because I want to use a prime example of this before I go on to the next part. And a prime example of this is, I got to investigate the ancient Ram's Inn. And this is a historic place outside of London. And it's been featured on a lot of paranormal shows. Now, when me and my team got there, we found that, when we interviewed this gentleman, who was an elderly gentleman, he had lived there, most of his life. He raised his family at this location. And so he had tons and tons of stories. And so I asked him, I said, well, where did all these, stories come from? I didn't want to assume that he experienced everything here. He's telling us stories that, of course, there's, children buried under the building. There was, sacrifices going on. There was, demon worshiping going on. There's a succubus there. And the list goes on and on and on. I mean, literally, we could have spent all day just, going over all of his stories. And a lot of these didn't come from experiences himself. There were stories that were passed on to him from other teams that had come in and done their investigations. So this is a prime example where the investigators had influenced the client, because he has had so many psychics visit his location and so many teams visit his location. So every time these people come in and do their experiments and do their investigations, they tell him more stories of what they think is going on. And then he carries these stories on to the next team that comes in. And so that's one of the things that you really have to be careful of, is where did all this come from? What is the root to a lot of this stuff? So we get into perception. Now, we all have heard the term, there are two sides to every story, but that is not true. There's actually three. In fact, what that is that's yours, mine, and then there's what actually happened. Okay. So the sad truth is we're all biased in how we share our experiences. Now, continuing on with perception, there's also the fact that how we perceive things through the left side and the right side of the brain. And they're finding that, especially in the paranormal field, I started to do some research into this. And I found that it was interesting that in some cases, a group of people could be in one haunted room at the same time, and half the team will experience something. They'll see something, at the end of the hall, and everybody, half the people point and say, oh, can you see it? But the other half don't see it. So this is a situation where I wonder if, one side of the brain is actually perceiving this information, the other side is not perceiving it. And so we've been doing some research into this. And so here is an image here that you'll see spinning around. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you see her spinning to the left. All right. Raise your hand if you see her spinning to the right. Yeah. Now, raise your hand if you've seen her go both ways. Yeah.
That would be me.
Okay. Well, this is nothing more than just an optical illusion. In fact, they believe that whatever side of the brain is receiving the information will determine on which way she's actually turning. Yeah. So there is something to the fact of, how we perceive things from the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. And this could explain in the paranormal field why some people experience things and some people don't. So mixing it up. Confabulation. All right. Now, this is when the brain confuses an imagined event with an actual memory. And in fact, we all have experienced this in some form or another. And experiments of this is if you run into someone that you hadn't seen, since you're a child, and they tell you about an event that you don't personally remember. And then you'll actually construct this memory from, things that you do remember at that time and think that, yeah, it really did happen, when you really don't remember if it did or didn't. Now, one theory is that we try to fill in the gaps to make partial memories make sense. Memories, particularly vague ones, seem equally valid regardless of whether we're remembering real events or imaginary ones, because the exact origin of the memory is often blurred. In fact, another example of this is repressed memories. This is something that is not practiced anymore, and this is a prime example of why. I know psychologists used to try and dig up repressed memories, but if you're not familiar with this case, this is where Beth was convinced by her therapist that on regular sessions she had, among other things, been in a satanic cult, eaten babies, been regularly raped as a child, watched her friend get murdered, and that she had sex with animals. It was even believed that she was, these were all repressed memories. In fact, she had the memories that she was raped by her father, and occasionally her mother held her down during these rapes. Now, there was even the fact that she believed that she was involved in a self-aborted pregnancy. But medical evidence had proven that she was actually a virgin until she was 22 and had never been pregnant. So in all aspects, this never happened. But she was influenced by her therapist. And maybe her therapist was giving her leading information, which created these false memories. So this is possible. Now, mood versus memory. Your moods affect your memory. Even if you're not suffering from depression, if you're falling down, if you're feeling down, stressed, or angry, you're more likely to remember experiences or being bad, or you're recalling negative memories at those times as well. Now, research has found that you are more likely to recall something if you're in that same mood as well. And then we get into the lazy brain. Your brain is designed to process information as quickly as possible. So like I said in the beginning, that quick thinking. So however, your brain is lazy by filling in what you are seeing or experiencing with generic information and figures it's probably there. So making our memories very suggestive. So you shouldn't underestimate the power of suggestion. So any questions on any of that so far? Nope.
I do. It's
Okay,
Melissa
no, go
again.
ahead.
I always have tons of questions. So back when you were talking about the Ram's Head Inn and talking about the I guess, the biases that this person had had from all of the different teams that had come in there.
Mhm.
What do you do when you're going to investigate a very public place that's allegedly haunted? We've all heard about, a place and all of the stories. And so how do you approach a situation? Do you go in, let's say the Montana State Prison, go in knowing that, oh yeah, 2 guys were murdered or hung there and there was a riot and people died. Do you go in with that information and use it as part of the investigation, or do you try and separate that out and go in clean?
Well, there's two different things that I always suggest people should do when they're investigating the paranormal. For one, going in cold is going to help you so much more. The less you know, the better. Now, there should be one person on the team that does have more details so that that person can validate people's experiences. So I always say the less people that know about what's going on in these places, the better. In fact, my team, when we do an investigation, unless it's a public location, we have to travel to it. We basically keep everybody in the cold. The only information they know is what city it takes place in and if it's a private home or a business. So I feel that that helps to build the credibility. Also, too, go with what you know and not with what you think you know. That is so important because when you hear all these experiences, and these stories, and again, especially when you're dealing with such a public place that is so well known to be haunted, you're going to come across thousands and thousands of stories and encounters. But you really have to go with the fact that, strip it down to the root. What do you really know what's going on? They may say that the ghost haunting this place is Gus. But how do we really know that it's Gus? Is it just because, and I find this in so many cases, a psychic came in and said, well, the ghost is Gus. Well, we don't know the psychic's, credibility. Even if it was a big name that came in, I've worked with a lot of, psychics, and I know that they're not always on. So I always say, you can't always assume that that's what you're dealing with or that's who you're dealing with. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that is very helpful because I tend to be a person that likes to collect information and I like to plan things. I always have a plan for everything. In fact, I've got a plan A, B, and C for everything.
That's awesome.
So it's hard for me sometimes to try to go in uninformed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something I have to prepare for. I have to plan to go in uninformed.
Right. And I get it. I'm one of those people that when we're going to set up an investigation, especially when you don't know if you're going to have the opportunity to go back. Some of these places, when you travel to distant places and you have this opportunity to investigate a place, like, Waverly Hills, it's good to have some information so you can plan out your investigation and know what kind of equipment you want to have, what experiments you want to do. So again, like I said, it is good to have somebody on your team that has that information. I don't feel everybody should have that information. So maybe you're that person. Unfortunately, you're going to know all that information to help plan the investigation. And that's a tough spot to be in because sometimes I don't like to know too much information because when I have an experience, I like to be able to validate it. And it's hard when you go in front loaded. So
yeah.
All right. So
does Barb have a question or hand is up?
Yes, go ahead.
She's can't unmute her.
I think I did that by accident.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I've never done this before, so I'm kind of looking around.
Oh, no problem. All right. So if nobody else has a question, we'll go ahead and continue on. So getting started with the journaling process. All right. So get comfortable, and find a structure that works for you. A notebook, a computer, iPad, tablet, whatever works for you. Definitely take advantage of that. Now you have to commit to this. This only works if you commit to your journaling. Otherwise, missing out really takes away from the whole picture. So do try to commit to those details. And be worry-free. Don't worry about spelling or grammar. Sentence fragments or bullet points are just fine. And don't worry about editing as well. And be extremely honest with yourself when writing, okay? And don't analyze or overthink your encounter before you've written it down. Don't look for the answers right away. The answers may come to you after you start to read, 3 or 4 pages of what you put into your journal. You might start to notice things. Now, try to answer those 5 critical questions: who, what, where, when, and then ask yourself why. You'll never know from a single entry, but through multiple entries, patterns may emerge. You might begin to see some trends, triggers, or learn something about yourself or even the haunting. You discover if the haunting is intelligent or residual by how it interacts with the environment. Through documentation, you're also gaining some control. All right, because I find that through this documentation too, it helps to relieve some of that fear. And when people are really focused on the fear, they really don't have control over the situation. But when you start to document it, and again, it just comes from a lot of these television shows that have pushed that trigger in people's head that this is all bad. Bad things can only come from this. But again, you start to put yourself at ease when you start to document these things and realize, wow, this really wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Now, journaling about your experience allows your brain to relive it and reaffirms your experience. Journaling provides accountability, the raw account from point A to point B. And if more than one person in your home or place of business is experiencing something, then, make it a communal journal as well. And as I've always expressed to people, details build credibility. There is nothing wrong with too much information. All right. So basically what you're doing is you're painting an honest picture into the world of the paranormal. All right. Little data yields little insight. So retrace your steps. In fact, we even have our clients retrace their steps whenever they claim to have had an experience. This helps with recall. It also helps with debunking. Now, the more details you can offer regarding your experience, the more the journal will become available to offer you help, support, and guidance. Now, these are some of the sample questions that I would always suggest that you can always write down is, what time did it happen? What did it look like? Did you hear anything? Did you smell anything? Did it invoke any feelings? Was there a change in temperature? Did you sense anything? Was it a controlled environment? Was there anyone around at the time? How bright was it? What color was it? So again, those are some of the questions you would want to ask. Now, stress levels are also very important when people are having experiences, to write this down in your journal. Rating your emotions, stress levels from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. And you should also question those that were around as well. Now, why, and I should explain, why we want to record stress levels is this also could explain poltergeist activity. Now, the term poltergeist is constantly misused, or the word is misunderstood, because there's been a lot of programs and books and stuff like that that have misused the word poltergeist. But if you go back to old textbooks term, a poltergeist is a non-human haunting. It is believed to be non-channeled telekinetic energy coming from a living person on the property. So it's not coming from a ghost or, anything else. It's actually coming from the person. All right. So, agents, they're referred to as agents. So you're finding situations like, children going through puberty, stressful conditions. And they're also finding now that when women are going through body changes, such as a pregnancy or even menopause, that can actually stir up poltergeist phenomena as well. Okay. So just keep that in mind. So while writing your stress level, and I've experienced this quite a bit, that I found situations where when couples were experiencing paranormal phenomena, and a lot of this was physical activity, doors slamming, cupboard doors opening, things being thrown. A lot of that was happening right after or during they were having a fight. So that just goes to prove that this is actually coming from one of the members in that couple rather than a ghost itself. So rating the encounter from 1 to 10 as well, and that's basically, 10, you believe that this was paranormal. 1, you don't, you're pretty sure it wasn't paranormal. Okay. So this helps us determine, was it really a ghost? And this helps people to, explain or even start to debunk their own encounters, because this develops critical thinking. And again, it relieves that fear, because you have to understand too, once people get it in their head that they're experiencing a ghost, everything becomes paranormal. And believe me, in the very beginning, they start to write page after page after page of all the things they're encountering. But as they start to rate them from 1 to 10, then they start to realize, well, wait a minute, maybe that really wasn't a ghost. Maybe that was me misplacing my keys, or maybe I really did leave the door open and forgot to shut it. Then they start to develop that critical thinking, and they start to fiddle it down to the real paranormal experiences that they could be experiencing. Now, this is an example of our client journal that we have. We give this to our clients, so they actually have something to fill out before we actually proceed with an investigation. And it's just simple things, the time and date, and then information, if they could write down the weather if they like, and then just a little bit. We're not expecting novels from people. So I always encourage them, the more details that they can provide, the better. But if they could just keep a highlighted note, that's great as well. So again, I kind of covered all this. The witnesses are also important if there was somebody there that witnessed it. And again, their stress level. Had this happened, right after a fight or during a fight. Now, we also, for our investigations, I have my team keep journals, all right? And this helps us because in most ghost hunting teams, the biggest problem that they have is getting everybody to turn in reports, all right? Everybody experiences this. And so what I do now is I have my team keep a journal. Each member keeps a journal of what they're doing during the investigation, because we tend to forget. This is all volunteer work. And so again, when they have to go home and start doing their homework, they don't want to do their homework. So it makes the team accountable. Actually, it also keeps track of where everybody is at any time. So time calls when things happen, and does it correlate with anything else that had happened at that time? So this is really important, because a lot of times when somebody hears a noise, people are always second guessing. And I'm only using this as an example because I've been a guest investigator with so many investigation teams out there, and I find a lot of times when somebody says, "Oh, I heard a noise," people start second guessing what was going on at that time, because no one ever kept a good record of what actually was happening at that time. So when my team, anybody hears a noise, we all write it down, the time and what everybody was doing at that time, because we've been able to debunk so many experiences. When somebody heard a loud noise, we found out that somebody on the second or third floor dropped something. So, and that person who dropped something, they will write it down and said, I dropped something at this time. Well, the team downstairs heard it. And this also helps us to, retrace our steps as well. And the whole journal becomes a basic walkthrough of the entire investigation. And this is an example of our team's investigation journal. So you basically are keeping track of, also keep everybody on atomic watches. I know a lot of people will have their cell phones because all of our cell phones are pretty much synced at the same time. But some people don't like to have cell phones on during the investigation. You can actually turn it on to airplane mode. That's fine. But some people will just use atomic watches as well, and that just keeps everybody in sync on the time. You got the time chart. You got the room by room. And I always have everybody detail, even if you walk into one room, write down the time you walked into the room, and then write down the time you walked out. Even if it's just a minute difference, write that down. Again, the more details, the better. It becomes your investigation. It makes your investigation more credible. All right. And log as much as you can. There should be something logged every 5 minutes on the journal. And again, it's just bullet points. Sketching is also really nice. If you encounter was visual, try to draw it. All right. You don't have to be an artist, but use color to add detail as well. Use a background to show size. So in closing, don't be a lazy ghost hunter. Remember, details build credibility. When you translate an experience into written language, we essentially make the experience more graspable. We start to process of learning and begin to question our surroundings. Journaling is the first step in collecting evidence and must be kept in its true raw form, because without the details, we will always be wondering, was it fact or was it fiction? So that is my journaling. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Any questions?
I was wondering, how do you, so if you're investigating and you're going into different rooms and it's dark, how do you write stuff down when it's dark and kind of with your equipment and that as well? Like, how do you navigate both of them at the same time?
Well, the thing is we'll usually have everybody with a clipboard and a pen. You should write everything down. Don't ever depend on your recorders to keep all your notes, because then you run into errors with some sort of recording issues. Maybe the mic wasn't plugged in, maybe the batteries died, and now you have to recall from memory. And as we've learned through this PowerPoint, your memory can be your worst enemy as well. So, you should always write down key notes throughout your investigation. Now, I find it a lot of times is the biggest problem with a lot of the ghost hunting groups are people are trying to do too much at once. So they're juggling a bunch of different equipment at the same time. And we really try to limit that. We'll have you have 2 pieces of equipment. Everybody will be in charge of different pieces of equipment. And that just, frees up your hands so you don't have to, constantly be juggling things and still be able to journal anything that's important at the time. So you really do have to make that commitment. And sometimes it might be hard for people, but again, if you want to build that credibility, writing everything down is going to make it more credible.
What about if you're in a team? Let's say there's 2 people investigating a room on their own. If one is actively handling, digital recording and camera, and the other is just the observer taking notes, like a medical assistant to the doctor kind of situation.
And I'm fine with that. I'm fine if it's a 2-person team, or maybe a 3-person team, if one person is committed to journaling and the other people are doing the equipment or doing whatever is needed to be done. But also too, I just want to make sure if that's going to be what's happening, then you need to stick together as a team. I see a lot of people start out as a team, but then halfway through the investigation, everybody kind of splits off and does their own thing. I don't allow that for my investigation team. Everybody has to, stay together as a team. So when you walk into a room, you all walk into the room at the same time. But when you leave the room, you all leave the room at the same time. So that is perfectly fine if somebody on that team wants to be, just the journaler, and everybody else is free to do whatever else they need to do.
Yeah, I've just seen some people struggling, like trying to get stuff set up, and everybody's then kind of looking at them and trying to help, and
Right.
nobody's actually kind of looking around
Right.
and observing.
Exactly. And you miss out on a lot of that stuff. So I do think it's very important that somebody should be committed to journaling and everything that's going on. Any other questions?
Okay, before everybody goes, unmute yourselves, and now we have to sing "Happy Birthday" to
Oh,
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday to you. Happy
Happy
birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ross.
Happy
birthday
birthday to you. That was
So
really
awkward.
sad.
I know, you guys sound like you're all
Some people
dying.
were not unmuted, and it was really sad.
Sounded like a funeral dirge.
Going to be cutting
Couldn't
that
figure
out
out
of
how to
the,
work it. Sorry. Happy birthday, Ross.
Oh,
be
thank you
cutting
so
that out of
much.
the
I'm
recording.
unmuted.
I love you.
just please
Me
cut
away.
that out, Mark. That'd be great. Thanks.
All right. So any other questions before we call it a night?
I had a question. It was more about, I guess, stress than anything.
Uh-huh.
Because in these shows that you watch, like I watched one yesterday, this guy was up there on the floor by himself and the elevator opens and he's all freaked out and he doesn't even go and look in the elevator. He just calls someone in and runs off the floor.
Oh my
Have
God.
you ever done something where you were scared?
Oh yeah,
know
I've been in situations where I don't want to be alone in a certain room, but I'm not going to run off screaming. That defeats the whole purpose of what we're trying to do, and that's another thing that just kind of ticks me off on a lot of these fiction shows is when they do have an experience, they all scream and run out of the room.
I mean, I was like, go look in the elevator.
Exactly. So yeah, there are places that I would definitely say I would definitely go back and investigate every place I've ever investigated. But there are some that I just would not want to be alone, and I would never encourage anybody to be alone.
Oh, I agree.
Investigation. You should always have a partner for a couple reasons. One, for safety, and the other is for credibility as well. Because if you have an experience, you want somebody to validate your experience. Now, I've done experiments where, I've been alone, but we've had cameras and a bunch of equipment on me. So if I do have an experience, at least it's recorded so people can, validate that experience. So, but yeah, I would never encourage anybody to go off on their own.
Yeah, I watch these shows and I'm like, but Ross said we should always have a partner.
Yes. But you see, a lot of those shows, that's what they focus on, is because they want you to see their fear. They want you to to experience it with them. So it's all about building up the drama. So yeah,
because if
So we laugh
he
at him.
was, because he truly wasn't alone, somebody had to be filming, right?
Exactly.
well, in some cases, yes. In most cases, yes. There's usually a camera guy with them, but then there are some where they're just focusing, from the DVR cameras that are placed throughout the house or business that'll film their experiences, or they're doing a handheld camera as well. So I have seen shows where they claim to be completely alone, and it very well could be the situation. But yeah, you're right. People tend to forget that a lot of times there is a camera guy following them around. So anything else? All right. Well, thanks, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And hopefully you'll tune in for my next class.